Good morning, everyone. Today we're going to do a lot of reading in Hebrew without any translations. I will translate, but I don't have the translations written down because today is a very esoteric subject, a very spiritual subject that I will recommend you follow up today's class by seeing, is this backwards? Do you see this backwards? You see it the right way, yeah? This is a magazine that comes out once a month. Editor-in-chief is the Shliach of the West Side of Cleveland, Rabbi Mendel Jacobs. And in it, this month, happens to be an article called The Essence of It All, the two approaches in understanding Hashem's infinite greatness. That is essentially the subject of today's lesson as we look at the note that the Alter Rebbe put into the second chapter of Tanya. It's quite an extensive and profound subject. And the Derech magazine, which is a delightful magazine for anybody that's interested in Chabad or Chabad stuff. The Derech magazine is doing a two-part treatment of it, and it's very, very nice. What we will do today is try to focus on the subject of this footnote in the context of Tanya. So let's review what was the issue. What was the issue that the Alter Rebbe brought up, raised in the second chapter of Tanya, that has to be addressed now from the standpoint of mysticism, of Kabbalah. Here is the Rambam's words. One day we'll get a technology director and we won't have to worry about this. No, sorry, this is the wrong page. Here are the Rambam's words. Oh. Says the Rambam, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Hashem, Makir Amitoi, V'yodea Oisa K'moshe, he knows himself exactly as he is. And he does not know with an intelligence which is apart from himself, as we know, because we and our intelligence are not one, but the Creator, blessed be He, and His intelligence and His life are one from every lateral angle and manner of unity. Why is it necessary to describe Hashem this way? If He and His life and His intelligence were independent, then there would be many powers. There would be many, so to speak, gods. Therefore, we must say, says the Rambam, that the matter is not so. Elo echad mikol tzad u'mikol pino v'chol derech yichud. Rather, Hashem is absolutely one from every angle and from every possible angle aspect. Thus, we are saying, shehu hayodeya, he is the, in other words, he is the known. Nope, he is the knower. V'hu hayodua, and he is what is known. V'hu hadeyo atzmo, and he is the ability to know. He is intelligence. Hakil echad. And the Rambam, of course, qualifies the statement by saying a human being doesn't have the ability to properly understand that whole teaching just now. What's the problem? Why did the Alter Rebbe bring this teaching from the Rambam even in the first place? So the Alter Rebbe brought this teaching from the Rambam in order to prove to us that the fact that a human being, the soul of a Jew, not the human being, the soul of a Jew, the divine soul, the fact that it is mechochmo nafkes, the fact that it is olu b'machshava, the fact that the soul of the Jew arose in the mind of Hashem, in the wisdom of Hashem, that it's rooted in the wisdom of Hashem, that means that the soul of the Jew is absolutely one with God himself. That's why the Alter Rebbe brought that teaching from the Rambam to say that unlike humans, where we're using human language, but we have to recognize there's a difference between human intelligence and godly, divine intelligence. There's a difference. Human intelligence means there's a human being and what he knows and his ability to know that God has blessed him with. That means that if something is rooted in human intelligence, that's not rooted in the human being themselves. In the analogy we brought from a human being, it has to be deeper than the intelligence. It has to be in the DNA. It has to be rooted in the essence of the soul. But here we're saying by Hashem that it's rooted in his intelligence, and that's supposed to prove that the divine soul is a veritable piece of God from on high. Therefore, the Alter Rebbe brought the teaching of the Rambam. Yes, Hashem's wisdom is absolutely one with his essence. And being rooted in the wisdom of Hashem means you are rooted in the essence of Hashem. Here is the problem. The challenge. This comes from the Maharal, the holy Maharal who created the Golem, was the Rav in Prague. This is what the Maharal wants to say. The Maharal wants to say that Hashem is beyond any kind of description. Hashem is beyond any kind of categorization. You cannot call Hashem an intellectual being. You cannot say that he is intellect. He's beyond all that. He is infinite. The words of the Maharal that Chassidus has adopted and repeats over and over and over are right here. Ki hu yisbarech, he, the blessed one, holy, Hashem, the Holy One, blessed be he, is pashut betachlis apshitos, is simple in every manner of simplicity. Meaning, there are no parts, and there is no definition, and there is no category, and there is no description. Hashem's being is absolutely simple and has in no way can it be assigned a character, not intelligence, not even infinite or finite. Pashut betachlis apshitus, absolutely simple and free of any definition, any defining characteristics, any limitations. But the Maharal opens by first explaining why the Rambam is moved to argue and to present this notion the way that he did, defining the divine light of Hashem, the essential light of Hashem, as an intellectual power and a combination of intellectual powers. Omenam, let's read from the Maharal. This is Gevuros Hashem in the second of three introductions. It's the 13th and 14th chapter of the introduction, the 13th and 14th paragraph of the introduction. We skipped 15 and 16, and we'll have the 17th paragraph. Omnam, however, im anu moidim, even as we agree, b'hanocha sechel hapoel, shehu poel hanimtzayim ba'olam, ein kan mokim zeh klal lahashiv ki zeh b'chayetze v'zeh menachas loy. That is something that Hashem, through His wisdom, guides the world. That is something we all agree. We're not arguing about that. Rak, let's go from here. Rak masha omar. It's only what the Rambam wrote. That if Hashem were to learn new information as events transpired on earth, if Hashem were to come to know them, that would mean that he, Hashem, is gaining knowledge, and that would be a change in the original mover, in the original being. And the one thing we know about God, the one thing we know in the true definition of God is that he has to be first and he has to be unchanging. There are other things, and there are reasons why he has to be first and he has to be unchanging. And let's look at those for just a second. We won't go very deeply into it. Why does he have to be first? And why does he have to be unchanging? From the same principle. If he is not first, that means that he was caused by a power greater than him. Then he's not God. The point, the first qualification of being God is there can be nothing greater than you. Nothing. You cannot even have a partner that is equally great. That's not God. God has to be the greatest power. Because why? Because that's the definition of God. The first mover, as the philosophers say, the first being, the first cause, however you want to describe it, he has to be first so that there should be nothing preceding him. Because if there was something preceding him, then that thing would be God. I had a conversation at my Shabbos table with a delightful 10-year-old. And he asked questions about Hashem and God and all that stuff. And the answer is simple. What do we know about God? Well, how do you find God? Well, you came from your parents. Your parents came from their parents. The parents came from them, all the way back. So where did the all the way back come from? Whatever he named it, didn't matter. And where did that thing come from? And where did that thing come from? And you trace it all the way back, all the way back, all the way back. Where does it begin? The thing that is the beginning, before we attribute any additional powers, kindness, compassion, mercy, wisdom, it doesn't matter. The first thing is that God needs to be the beginning, the first, the original, the primary. If he is already primary, meaning that he is first, then he must by definition also be unchangeable, because in order for something to change, some other power must have, some other being must have power over him to change him. Things just don't change by themselves. Even Hashem doesn't just change by himself according to the rules of physics that Hashem created, unless somebody is changing him. And that can't be, because there is nothing greater than him. There's nothing that has any power over him. He is the first, he is the greatest. That's the definition of Hashem. So Rambam is arguing, and it's in line with the philosophical arguments of the non-Jewish philosophers of his era and those that preceded him, is that the reason the philosophers argued the reason God cannot care how human beings are behaving themselves is because if he is paying attention, that would constitute a change in him. Every time God receives new data about what's happening on earth, that would constitute a change in him. Yesterday he didn't know, and now he knows. That's a new state of being. That can't be. And so therefore, the Rambam is offering an explanation according to Torah. He says, because Hashem and his wisdom are one, that he is the knower and he is the knowledge and he is the ability to know. And everything that happens in the world is by the power of Hashem's knowing himself. Hashem knows himself and everything that transpires in the world. And everything that is in the world is a veritable piece of Hashem. It's completely one with Hashem. Therefore, by knowing himself, he knows everything. Noshev Lebim Mokem, says the Maharal, I want to answer him here. Ki nekushya zu benuya al das she'amaru ki ein hu yizbarach mekabel toyadim. This question is built on the premise that Hashem cannot be subjected to any descriptions, any descriptors. V'hu v'sichle davar echad, and the answer is that he and his knowledge are one. V'im yishtane daitoi, and if his knowledge is going to change, yishtane atzmuseh chas v'shalom, that means that his self is changing. And God forbid, we cannot say that kach himemrim, that's how they argue. Says the Maharal, to argue that Hashem is an intellectual being, or even, if we're going to borrow the terms from the Maimarim and Chassidus that discuss this issue, even if we want to say that you could apply the term knower to Hashem, right? That's the question here. Can you even apply the term knower to Hashem? The Rambam says yes, of course you can. And the Maharal wants to say no, you cannot. Because he is completely removed even from any such title as knower, wise one, kind one, merciful one. We, the students of Moses, our teacher of blessed memory, we don't say this. God forbid, heaven forfend, to speak such words about Hashem. He, the Holy One, blessed be He, whom the sages called the Holy One, blessed be He. V'lo nikra haseichel baruch hu. They're not calling him the intellect or the knower, blessed be He. Why? Because we really don't know his essence, the true nature of his being. What we do know is that he is completely removed, exalted, apart from any kind of physicality, any kind of body, any kind of existence. That's why the sages call him Holy One, blessed be He. Because what's the message when we're calling him holy? Because holy means far away, distant, set apart. Because Hashem is simple with the utmost simplicity in terms of his being, without definition, without barriers, without boundaries. From this very fact that Hashem is utterly simple, that his being, Hashem's state of being, is utterly simple, ein davar nivdal mimenu. Therefore, nothing is separate from him. Because he is utterly separated from any category and from any particular state of being, therefore, no object that does find itself in a particular category or does find itself in a particular state of being is actually apart from Hashem. How does that work? Because an object that has a particular description, an object that has a particular character or has a particular classification will be associated with things that are of the same scale, of the same category, of the same classification. And bishvil oisei geder, and because of those very classifications and categories and characteristics, nivdal mimenu davar she'enei begeder. Anything that doesn't fit in that classification, in that category, in that character, will be separate from him, will be unrelated to him. But Hashem, since Hashem is simple and has no categorization, no classification at all, therefore there is no reason why anything should be separate from him. There is no limit to him that would preclude his being involved in everything and attached to everything and present in everything. And there's nothing that's separate from him. And therefore, that's how he knows everything. There's no reason he shouldn't. Why do some people know some things and other people don't know those things? Those people were in the context where they could find out that information, and other people were not in that context. Hashem is not subject to any context, therefore he knows everything. He was everywhere. He is everywhere. He will be everywhere. He knows everything. And he can do everything. That's the Maharal's words. He can do everything. Why do some people have the ability to do things and other people don't have those same abilities? You are classified as an artist, and you are classified as an intellectual, and you are classified as a business person, and you have the skills that come along with that. You are in your classification. You have your character. You have your abilities, your place, your context, your limitations, which make you who you are, as opposed to who your neighbor is. But Hashem doesn't have any of those things. Therefore, he's capable of everything. That's why, because he doesn't have a particular categorization or a limitation in any kind of particular way. And that's why everything can come from him, as we will explain. Now, if Hashem did not know everything, or everything did not come from him, the only cause for that would be because Hashem was restricted to a certain classification that prevents him or precludes the emergence of a certain kind of thing from him. V'zeh einoi, and that ain't so. Ki lo yugdar, because Hashem is not classified or limited or defined in any way at all. V'davar zeh barur, and this thing is clear. The premise, according to the Maharal, the premise of the Rambam's argument is not necessary. We don't have to say, we don't have to be concerned to find the right classification for Hashem to describe him in a particular manner that will remove the possibility of change from him, which is what the philosophers were trying to do in the Maharal's understanding. They were trying to solve the problem that if we're going to describe him as A, that will preclude his ability to be involved in B or C or D. Therefore, we have to find something and create a persona that is not subject to all the pitfalls, all the shortfalls that are not fitting for a God, for a supreme being, for the first mover, for the original cause. And therefore, the philosophers settled on intellect. The Rambam, chief among them, says the Maharal, it's not necessary. It's specifically his lack of definition that allows God to be everywhere, everything, and for everything to come from him. Ubeshvil zeh, so we skipped a few paragraphs, but let's jump into paragraph 17 from the second introduction to his book Gvuras Hashem. Ubeshvil zeh, because of this, hakusha shehikshe ech yischayv min hasechel hapashat geshem, the question that they asked also, how can you get from simple intelligence, physical existence, zeh yischayv lahem im neimar davar zeh ki atzmusay sechel pashat. That's only a question if you hold, like the philosophers do, that the essence of Hashem is a simple intelligence, a free intelligence. But if you say, like Kabbalah says, like what the Maharal is, in the Maharal's opinion, what the Torah says, is that Hashem is a being that simply exists in a simple existence without definition, without categorization, without classification, without limitation. Anything can come from him. There was a Hasidic lecturer lecturing in Crown Heights at one of the great meetings, and he was lecturing about this, that, and the other thing. And afterwards, during the Q&A, a very intelligent Russian man stood up and said, the rabbi mentioned something from nothing. Yeah, the world was created out of nothing. If the world was created out of nothing, then what is the value of nothing? Nothing must have some value. And the rabbi said, infinite potential. Now, this man, the Russian man, must have been an engineer or something. He understood the answer, and he gave a one-man standing ovation while the rest of the room looked on, not exactly sure what just happened. Akuponim, the point is that it is the no definition, the zero, what it's called, the simplicity, the purity of Hashem's being that has no definition, no classification, no characterization, no boundaries, no borders, no limits, that allows everything to come from him without a problem. Anything could come from him. He is infinite potential, so to speak. V'yaf al gav shahanivroim him gashmim, and even though the creations that emerge from him are physical, there's no problem, there's no reason they can't come from him. Because he is so pure and so simple. Lo yugdar, he's not limited, he's not classified, he's not defined. Therefore, any existence can come from him. It's not a question even. But if you're going to argue like they do, that Hashem is an intellectual being primarily, because they say that the knowledge, that is his essence, he is the knowledge, he is the knower, he is the ability to know, then they will have the question, how is it possible that intellect should produce something physical? But we, students of Kabbalah, in the Maharal's opinion, students of Torah, We hold, we say, we know that he, the Holy One, blessed be he, is a simple being, lo yugdar b'meh, not classified by anything, ve'ein inyan zasechel, not even intellectual, ve'ein anu yedim hayvayaseh mahusay. That's not something we have to grasp. There's nothing to grasp. There's no way we could know his true being, his true nature. That's the Maharal's argument. That that presents the Alter Rebbe with the following issue. The fact that Hashem knows, the fact that Hashem has wisdom, the Alter Rebbe raised that issue to prove that the soul of the Jew, the divine spark, which is rooted in Hashem's wisdom, is rooted in his essence. And the Maharal is saying no. No. The Maharal is saying the fact that Hashem has wisdom is like a hammer in the hand of the blacksmith. It's a tool that he uses. It's not part of him. He has no parts. You cannot assign to him any parts. This presents the Alter Rebbe with a problem. And therefore, the Alter Rebbe brings the position of a fellow great Kabbalist on the level of the Maharal, if we could even judge levels of Kabbalists of earlier generations, which is something we should not do, but let's say. And he describes, after doing a deep study in the first 2 chapters of the 4th volume of his book called Pardes Rimonim, where he studies the opinion of the Kabbalists who say that Hashem's divine attributes are like a hammer in the hand of the blacksmith, like the Maharal wants to say. Or, and then the other opinion that says that Hashem has no tools, God forbid, you cannot assign any kind of tools to Hashem. He is pure and simple, and his expressions are pure and simple. And therefore his divine attributes are holy and divine and very much a part of Hashem's light. The Ramak takes a third position and he says it's actually a combination of the two. There is a tool that is infused with Hashem's pure light, and that, the coming together of those two things, creates the sephiras, the divine attributes of Hashem. In presenting his argument, the Ramak in Pardes Rimonim, volume 4, presents some wording that's very similar to what the Rambam writes. And that helps to bolster the Alter Rebbe's argument that being rooted in Hashem's wisdom means that you are rooted in the self, in the essence of Hashem. Yoduahu, he writes, it is known, ki ein yedias Hashem yizbarach ki yedias shar hanivroim. Hashem doesn't know things the way created being knows things. Ki, because hema yodim biyediah chutz mehem. They only know things that are outside of themselves. Even their knowledge is something separate from themselves. Hamashal bazed, the analogy is, let's use the case of a human being. Ha'odam hayodea tzura min hatzura is a person who knows a certain form. He knows of the form. Oyeze davar she'etz tayer b'daiter, anything that he could conjure up in his mind. Yene al kolpanim yihu gimel dvarim. There are going to be at least 3 things at play. First is hada'as shahaya mishulol. The knowledge that previously was removed from that form, and now it is attached to that form. That's one thing. And then the knowledge that with the knowledge which he uses to grasp the thing that he is envisioning. And then there is, thirdly, Hatsura Hayudua Hare Gimel. The object itself, or the image itself, that's 3. It's not exactly the same as the way the Rambam describes it. The Rambam's description is perhaps a little simpler, that he is what is known, he is the ability to know, and he is the one who is doing the knowing. There's a bit of a simpler way to describe it, but this is the Ramak's description. V'nikroyim hadas v'hayodeya v'hayodua. In boiling it down, the Ramak uses basically the same language as the Rambam. These are called the ability to know, the person that is knowing, and the knowledge. But that's not how Hashem knows. He is all three, all at the same time, just like the Rambam says. And the Ramak is a great Kabbalist. And the Ramak goes on to explain many things, that if we don't say that, if we say that there are tools other than Hashem himself, and that Hashem himself is removed from those tools and can't be involved in them because they would impose a limitation or a description on him, then basically we're saying that the tools that Hashem has created with which he runs his world, they are running the world and not him. There's a lot to understand. The time is flying away from us. So we will leave the in-depth study of the text of the Ramak for another time, and let's go look at the summary of the whole argument. This is from the book called Sefer HaErchin or HaArochin Chabad. It is the encyclopedia on Chabad teachings, organized by Rabbi Okan, who is the greatest mind of Hasidus in our generation at this time. And he compiled the opinions about what the divine attributes are, what the Maharal and the Ramak and the Rambam are arguing about. So we'll read a little bit. We can't read very much, but it'll give us a good idea of what the debate is about. Oifen hasfires sheba eires. How are the divine attributes, Hashem's own attributes, his kindness, his wisdom, and so on, how do they function in the state of lights? That will depend on how we understand what divine attributes are. When we say divine attributes, are we talking about created things? Are we talking about lights that shine from Hashem, energies that come out of Hashem? Or are we talking about created things, vessels? Or are we talking about a combination of both? The Rakanti says that the spheres, they are vessels, tools, and they are not lights. They are not energies that flow from Hashem. They are tools that Hashem created, that are separate from him. According to that, that means that the light of Hashem that shines through them and passes through them. For example, if Hashem will shine his light into the channel, into his tool called chesed, kindness, that light, which is pure and simple and unadulterated, will activate kindness in the world. The tool, the fact that simple, pure light of Hashem flowed through the tool of kindness, will mean that kindness is now flowing into the world. So what's the relationship of the light to the vessel, to the channel? The light wears the channel, right? It's like a film where you shine pure, simple white light through a film, and all kinds of colors show up on the other side. But the light itself is still pure and simple. It's just that the film has colored it. If you remove the film, you'll see that the light is pure and white again. The Ma'areches has a different opinion. He says that spheres are in fact lights, pure and simple. He got that opinion from the Magen David with a slight variation. So according to that, the lights themselves, they are the spheres. Hashem has a light of kindness, and Hashem has a light of severity, and Hashem has a light of compassion. And when he shines his light of kindness, kindness enters the world. And when he shines his light of severity, judgment enters the world. And when he shines his light of compassion, compassion enters the world. Forgiveness enters the world. But it's the light from Hashem that's doing this. It's not a tool that's something separate from Hashem. And then you have the Ramak and the Arizal. The Ramak and the Arizal, they solve this issue. And those are the opinions that the Alter Rebbe quotes in this note in chapter 2 of Tanya. The Ramak and the Arizal. What are they arguing? What's their position? That the sphera is actually a combination of lights and vessels. See? Oires v'kelim. According to that, what is the relationship between the lights and the vessels? The lights by themselves, they are not the spheres. They are not the divine attributes. But when they dawn the vessels, then even the lights themselves become attributes. What is the meaning of the Arizal's opinion? Well, we could understand it in two ways. We could say that the Arizal agrees with the Ramak, that the lights by themselves are not actually spheres, but only when they enter the vessels, then the lights themselves become divine attributes. The light is transformed into a light of chesed. It was pure until it entered the vessel, and then it really did become, like, let's say, let's use our imagination now for an impossibility. Well, imagine an impossibility. You have a film that has the picture, you have a photograph film, and you shine a white light through it. And what happens is the light, as it passes through the film, becomes the person who's in the picture. In a physical sense, it's not possible. And in this analogy is probably not the best analogy that one could come up with. There are probably better analogies. However, in the case of the light of Hashem and the tools that Hashem has created with which he will manage his creation, kindness, severity, compassion, so on, the Ramak's opinion seems to be that when the lights are shining freely without any garments, they are pure and unadulterated, just like Hashem himself. But as soon as they enter one of the vessels of the spheres, of the attributes, they become that thing. They mesh completely with that tool. They join with that tool together, and together they are the attributes of Hashem, of his wisdom, of his understanding, of his connection, of his kindness, of his severity, and so on. There's another way to understand it, and that would be that the lights themselves are in fact expressed with a certain character. It's just that the character that is expressed in that light is hidden until the vessel, the garment of kindness or severity that it will put on reveals that. Now, this helps us very much with our problem that we had with the Rambam, which is the reason we're here. According to the Arizal, who is the final authority on Kabbalistic subjects, on Kabbalistic matters, according to the Rebbes of Lubavitch, the Arizal the Arizal is it in terms of Kabbalah. He is the Rav, the decider on Kabbalistic questions. So the fact is that there is a joining of Hashem's pure light with the garments that we call the divine attributes. They actually come together and become one, like the Rambam said. He is the knower, he is the knowledge, and he is the ability to know all at the same time. And yet, according to the Arizal, Hashem's light can still be pure and free of any classification and of any definition. What's the piece that's missing, though? How does the light of Hashem go from being pure and unadulterated to becoming enmeshed completely in a particular attribute? You understand the question? Only according to the Arizal's opinion is that possible. Why? Because the Arizal shared with us a secret from Torah that has not been shared until his generation, until he shared it. And in order to understand it, let's go up now to the actual words of the note that the Alter Rebbe put in the second chapter. This is the language of the note. We learned from the Rambam that the wisdom of Hashem is actually completely one with Hashem himself. We know that there is an argument against this in Kabbalah, from the Maharal, from the Magen David, and others. From the Kanati, maybe not the Magen David, and from others, fine. So the Alter Rebbe therefore addresses in his note those that are familiar with Kabbalah and are going to ask this question. Says the Alter Rebbe, Hagoah, footnote, We have Kabbalists who agree with the Rambam, as it says in Pardes Rimonim from Meshikar Devera, which we read. V'gam, right? What did the Ramak write? We read in the Ramak's own words almost a mirror image of what the Rambam wrote. Certainly, they are agreeing with each other. Maybe the premises that they are using to reach that conclusion are different, but the conclusion itself is the same: that Hashem and His divine attributes are utterly one with each other. You see, even that statement doesn't make sense. They are so one; it doesn't even make sense to say they are one with each other, because each and other requires a separation that does not exist between Hashem and His attributes. But that's linguistic flair. Then the Alter Rebbe continues. V'gam lefi Kabbalah so Arizal yitziva milso. This is also true according to the Kabbalah of the Ari, the Arizal. Yeah. In which manner, according to which doctrine of the Arizal is this possible? Besoid hislabshus oir ein seif baruchu al yedei tzimtzumim rabim bekelim de chochma bina v'das da'atzilus. Where and how? It's possible when the infinite light of Hashem, through many, many contractions, is able to be clothed and enmeshed into the garments of the various attributes. Then they take on a oneness. The light and the vessel that's containing it, they become one with each other. The infinite light of Hashem becoming absolutely one, enmeshed, integrated into the garment of, let's say, wisdom, understanding, or knowledge. And those are called the spheres of the highest realm, the realm of Atzilus. At that realm, and only at that realm, is the light of Hashem completely one with the garments. Afterwards, after that, where the garments are a little more crass, where the garments are a little more coarsened, where the garments are a little self-aware, the light of Hashem cannot properly join together with those attributes anymore. Those are not called Hashem's attributes anymore. Those are called created attributes. Those are called energies in the various levels of the hierarchy of creation, the system of creation. They're like planets in the solar system that are separate and apart from the Creator, even though they have all the same pieces and parts as the Creator does. There's wisdom at every level, there's understanding at every level, there's knowledge at every level, there's kindness at every level, there's severity at every level, all in the mirror image of the Creator, but they don't belong to the Creator, at least not in their own perspective. We cannot call them God's kindness. It's influenced by God's kindness, but it's not attached to Hashem so deeply that we would call it God's own wisdom. At the level of Atzilus, however, which is the highest world, at the level of Atzilus, the light of Hashem and the garment of the attribute are so totally bonded together that they are called one from every angle. They're unified completely from every possible angle. Now, what's important to know is that this is only possible according to the Arizal, because the Arizal introduced us to something that had not been introduced to us early, and that is called Tzimtzum contraction, specifically Tzimtzum Harishon, the first contraction. What is the first contraction? The Arizal taught us that before the world could be created at all, Hashem had to minimize His presence in the world. Of course, we know from the Alter Rebbe's explanations that Hashem did not actually diminish His presence in the world, only the awareness of His presence in the world was diminished. Hashem took away the knowledge of His presence from a certain space. That's called Tzimtzum Harishon. Now, this Tzimtzum Harishon, this first original contraction, is different than every subsequent contraction that will happen afterwards. Let's pause for a moment, because I don't want this to become very complicated. I want us to be very, very clear. Contraction means taking something and compacting it into a small space. Yeah, it doesn't mean to make it less. It means to pack it into a small space. Whenever Hashem is going to create a lower being, the light that shines from Hashem needs to be compacted and squeezed into this lower space. In addition to that, the light of Hashem, the awareness of the presence of that light needs to be hidden from that lower being, or the lower being will become absorbed into the light and will not exist. So there are two things there. On the one hand, the light has to be compacted, tight and small. And at the same time, it also needs to be hidden from the view of the creation that is sustained by it. That's called contraction and concealment, two very important stages. Now, what did Hashem do in the beginning? The very first contraction was actually not a compacting of light into a small, small space. It was, in fact, the utter removal of the light from that space. Absolute removal. Hashem himself was there. The light of Hashem was there. There was absolutely no hint of it in that space. Utterly removed. That's how it's possible for the subsequent light that comes in originally compacted and small to interact with physical beings and small beings. And even then, it needs to be constantly compacted and squeezed tighter and tighter, smaller and smaller, to fit into the smaller and lower levels of existence. How does that help us understand the coming together of Hashem's infinite light with one of his divine attributes? Because as long as the light emanates from Hashem himself, it really is absolutely beyond any kind of categorization, any kind of definition. It really is totally beyond the notion of coming together with something other than Hashem himself. It really is impossible. It really is so pure and so simple, so undefined, that unifying with a divine attribute is impossible. Hashem's light is so far removed from the question of being or not being one thing or being another thing, that before the original utter removal of the light of Hashem from the space of creation, and then the reintroduction of a compacted light, even for Hashem's light to unite with Hashem's own wisdom would be an impossibility. However, as the Arizal taught us, once the light was utterly removed and then a powerfully compacted light was reintroduced to the space of creation, now it's possible for the diminished, compacted, and concealed light of Hashem to interact and even bond with the vessels that are called wisdom of Atzilus, understanding of Atzilus, knowledge of Atzilus, where they could become Hashem's wisdom, Hashem's understanding, Hashem's knowledge. And that's what the Alter Rebbe tells us as the note continues. Let's see. Besoid, right? Vegam lefi Kabbalah so Arizal yitziva milsa. Even according to the Kabbalah of the Arizal, it's true. What the Rambam is saying and what the Ramak is saying. Besoid, according to the secret of Torah that we just reviewed, called Hislabshus Eirein Sev Barchum, the entering, the enmeshment, the coming together of the light of Hashem, the infinite light of Hashem, with the vessel of Chochmah, Bina, Das, of Atzilus through many, many compactions, contractions called Tzimtzumim. But that's only by Atzilus, ach lo l'mayla meha Atzilus, but not higher than Atzilus. higher than Atzilus, the light of Hashem will always be utterly simple and utterly undefined. This has been explained in another place. The infinite light of Hashem, even that compacted infinite light of Hashem, that is reintroduced after the original removal of all the light, is also so completely removed from the question of existence, of being or not being, of being one thing or being another thing, that you couldn't even call Chabad, which is the highest thing. There's nothing higher inside the realm of existence. Intelligence is the highest thing inside the realm of intelligence. Inside the realm of existence, intelligence is the top. It starts, Chachma bin Adas, Kulam bechachma asisa, as the Alter Rebbe writes at the end here. Everything begins with Chachma. Everything begins with wisdom. Wisdom is the peak of existence. But because the infinite light of Hashem is infinite, and Chokhmah is a definition, the infinite light of Hashem, even that which has been reintroduced in a compacted and contracted state, is so far removed from the question of being one thing or being another thing, that Chokhmah, wisdom, the peak of existence, might as well just be a lowly stone, a lowly kick of the toe on the sands of the beach. In the Rebbe's words, as we explained many times, the infinite light of Hashem is so far removed from the nature of intellectual existence, to the point where a intellectual state of being is considered equal to a stone on the seashore, like physical activity, which is the lowest garment, the lowest thing, the farthest thing from the essence. And that's why, although everything comes from Chokhmah, everything comes from wisdom, notice the Torah's language. It says, Kulam bechachma asisa. You have made everything, but you made it, you did it as if Chokhmah, as if wisdom is an activity that you do with your hands and feet, that you would call asiya. Right? Yeah. If it were an intellectual thing, you would say, Kulam bechachma, that you invented them or you discovered them, an intellectual description. But we don't have an intellectual description of the production of the world through chachma. We have a physical description. A physical event took place beginning with chachma. All the things that were created were done, doing like hands and feet, done through chachma. That is the note. It was a lot of work and a lot of fun to prepare it. And I'm very glad that we were able to go through it in depth. We will stop the recording and you'll turn on your microphones and we'll take some questions.